I've been offered two places. One is at Portsmouth at their university, which seems quite interesting, and the other's at Metropolitan Brighton University, which is a 3-year music production course, which they'd offered me a place on after an interview I had with Mike, who is a tutor there. During my first FMP, I produced a hip-hop album at home because of lockdown, which allowed me to work on what I was finding difficult, but meant that I wasn't able to collaborate with other artists, and also wasn't able to use live instruments because of this. Here's a few examples of the songs I produced during that time.
I should take it slow. I barely know what I'm doing here. No, I can't afford. I barely grow. Some stretching fears.
Stuck in my head, ain't got shit to do. Trying to get some bread, what it mean to you? Back in my head, ain't got shit to say. Back in my head, just trying to entertain. However, when we got back into the college, I was able to build upon my recording skills during my drum recording essay, where I researched into different drum recording methods, via Glyn John's method, the X and Y method, and just by experimenting. For example, positioning one mic near the main studio's glass window to see how it would give the recording a more reflective texture. Another example is positioning a mic near the floor, in which helped to further pick up the kick drum and make it pack more of a punch. These skills have influenced the direction of my second FMP, being another hip-hop inspired album, but focusing in on the elements that I wasn't able to do throughout my first FMP, meaning that I would implement recording live instruments whenever I think that they would add to the track. Researching this via books, such as the Studio SOS book by Dave Lockwood, Hugh Rob Johns and Paul Wright. I know that this book is reliable because I have used Sound on Sound's website many times during the course of being at college, and I've always found the information relevant and reliable. This was especially true when I was working on my drum recording essay, which meant I had to use various online sources, but out of all of them I've always found then that Sound on Sound was the most helpful and understandable of the bunch I chose for it. Guerrilla Home Recording by Carl Coyette, which I brought without much knowledge of, but am already finding very useful, as it is packed with relevant information and is written up in an easy to digest way. So meaning that I don't have to read a great wall of text to only half understand something. Instead, I've found the information easy to absorb, and which is in part thanks to the book's simplistic yet engaging layout. I will also, of course, research with the internet via reliable sources such as Music Tech Help Guy on YouTube, who I've always found informative and helpful in his knowledge of Logic X Pro, the website Music Tech, which I found reliable during my drum recording essay, and finally, I will of course be using Sound on Sound's official website and their YouTube channel. I will collaborate with other artists as much as I can, so that they can give my music their own unique spin via their thrilling production or vocals, and which will mean making sure to communicate to them clearly so that we both understand each other. I would also like to build upon my practical skills. For example, my vocals can still be offbeat and lack pronunciation. This is something I'd like to improve upon, because if my vocals are too offbeat, they could ruin the song, and if they lack pronunciation, then people might not take me seriously because it sounds like I'm being lazy. I will work on this via my focus group, who can give me helpful advice and criticisms about how I should improve upon my songs, and out to point out their flaws, which I hadn't noticed. My focus group would be very important. It would primarily consist of Mark Robinson, because of his knowledge of working in studios, Steve Davis, because of his knowledge of mixing and using DAWs, Nick Osborne, because of his in-depth knowledge of music, and so he will be able to bring some very interesting criticisms and ideas from this. Apart from this, I also get advice from my friends, Jacob Scott, who studied music at Ashcombe School and has given me some good advice on mixing in the past. Ozan, who I've worked with on several occasions and who has given me interesting ideas and criticisms throughout this. Lastly, my friend Sam Berry, who we listen to the same kind of music, so this would be a good starting point to kind of get someone who's maybe not a professional musician, but who can offer a valuable outsider insight. I will have them listen to my work throughout the project, especially when I finished a new song and would like some thoughts about where I should take it next. I will also do this for the end of the project for the final evaluation, where the results of which should be documented in WordPress, which should give me an idea of what I should be doing moving forward with my music. I will also build upon this by reading about techniques via books such as How to Rap by Paul A. Edwards, a book which I know is reliable because it features a plethora of interviews from different rappers who are well established for their skills, and so any advice from them is invaluable. I might get back into contact with Natalie, a vocal coach who helped me with my vocals during my World War II VE Day song, giving me brilliant tips about how I could work on my vocals, and so I know that she's a reliable source to come to when I need help with my vocals, especially singing. Concluding this, I will use my vocal group and research sources to aid me in producing the best end project, and reliably noting down the process of this in WordPress. Here are some examples of pre-production songs which I've made already for the project and with some context of their creation. 1. Nostalgia Blast. Nostalgia Blast was created in collaboration with my previously mentioned friend, Jacob Scott, who like me attended the Ashcombe School and who studied music there. He has recently been producing electronic music under the name Sinewy Digital, and so naturally we eventually worked on a collaborative song. The song itself is deep-rooted in personal nostalgia, which is reflected in the song's lyrics and its otherworldly instrumental, which can be found on his Bandcamp under the name Third Temple. 2. Gendo. While only being a sketch track at the moment, Gendo was heavily inspired by England's grime/drill scene, featuring an instrumental with a roaring bass and an overall chaotic vibe. 3. Lastly, I worked on the track Tribes. Subject matter-wise, it's about trying to find out where you belong, and if doing so is even worth it in the first place. The song's name was inspired by the book of the same name, written by Labour MP David Lammy, and within which he tries to explore the subject himself. One thing which I think is worth mentioning is that the songs are obviously develop. For example, Gendo would definitely develop since it's a sketch track, the vocals aren't laid out yet. Of course, that will happen to the other tracks as well, since now we are back in the studios and have access to high quality equipment and live instruments, which of course, as I've mentioned, I want to implement on this project, so it'd be a good idea to revitalise the current songs I've got and remix them, add stuff to them. Definitely remix them in both senses of adding live instruments, adding stuff, maybe getting features on them, and the sense of literally remixing them in the studio with the speakers, big speakers, and getting them to sound good because of this. So yeah, I just wanted to say that nothing on that preview is set in stone. Some of the songs probably won't make the project, but some hopefully will. In terms of my skills audit, there are areas that I still need to improve on, such as linking together information, which I've gotten better at during my drum recording essay and World War II VE Day project, so I will strive to improve upon this by mentioning how the information came together in WordPress, using hyperlinks, such as, this research was carried out in my practical work here, so meaning to connect up all the loose ends and to strengthen their connections to one another. This is something that I've strived to do in my proposal and presentation, where I've said how many tracks the project should have, 11 to 15, and also by naming my influences for the project, which I've done doing both of these. Referencing is also something I need to improve upon. I need to make sure that I'm consciously using referencing whenever I need to. According to Nick, this is something that slipped during my first FMP. Since then, I have been working on improving upon this, and which will be reflected strongly in my second FMP. Creating action plans is also important and should be done as a reliable result of reflection, meaning to figure out what I've got to do via reflection and then putting this into a plan to execute. I want to work on my vocals using several different techniques, such as composite tracks, meaning to record several takes and then splicing together the best parts of each, or alternatively, I could use punch-ins for my vocals, meaning to re-record where I left off if something goes wrong. Literally what I've been doing at this moment. This whole video has been put together with punch-ins, so I know it's quite an effective method to use. I want to work on my vocals via more practical techniques, such as breath control, and making sure that I'm not putting in too many words in the lyrics so that it doesn't go off beat. The songs and the project overall will take influence from hip-hop artists such as Kendrick Lamar, Mac Miller and Kanye West, but also taking inspiration from artists of other genres such as Frank Zappa, The Flaming Lips, death grips, sewer slut, big runga, and the sound of animals fighting. While for the album cover, I will also be taking inspiration from various different artists such as Shintaro Kago, Junji Ito, Hideo Azuma, Panpanya, and Takashi Murakami. I will spend 2 weeks on pre-production, aiming to create more concept tracks for the album, sending them to my focus group for their thoughts, and then developing the ones which I like the best during production. Apart from this, I will also mix down a band track given to me by Mark, and who I will send it back and forth to until the mix is done. This will also mean researching mixing and mastering via the books that I've mentioned, and as well as the internet sources, as well as doing the experiment itself, which will be valuable primary research. I also researched copyright from my use of sampling throughout the project, and research into the best ways to get the project up on streaming while having all the rights cleared. All of this should be appropriately noted down on WordPress to be seen by the examiners and marked. I will then spend 4 weeks on production. This will entail further working on the songs, fixing their flaws to the best of my abilities, and further working on mixing and mastering them down. All of this should be put on WordPress. Lastly, I will have 2 weeks of post-production, meaning creating an album cover for the project out of the 3 designs, choosing the one I like the best and developing it into the final design. I will also have the project up on streaming platforms and non-streaming platforms by now. This should be appropriately noted down on WordPress to show the journey and the progress I've made throughout the project. Practical problems are going to be with recording and my vocals, such as not knowing how to record an instrument and or finding that one recording technique works better than the other, or that combination of the two will lead to the most effective solution. This can also be resolved by reading the books I've mentioned beforehand, which also cover recording live instruments, and as well as the reliable websites I've mentioned beforehand, which will more than likely cover the topics. My vocals might also be a practical problem because they might go off beat or lack pronunciation, and which can be fixed by punching in another clearer take of the vocal or using the composite track method. Another practical problem is the studios, as it's possible that they could be booked out on a day when I need to use them, but which could be easily avoided by emailing college technician James Baker that I would like to use one of the studios and then waiting for approval. There's also the practical problem that logic crashes, meaning having to pick up work from an earlier point and losing valuable time I spent working on the song. This can be prevented by saving regularly and making sure that Logic has its auto-save feature turned on. Having to work 1 week at college and 1 week at home might also be a problem. For example, if I leave important work at college and I'm not able to access it until I go back, meaning that week I spent at home could potentially be wasted if I'm not careful. There's also the slim possibility that I could catch COVID, meaning isolating for 10 days, and which could hinder the project if it happens at a time of great importance. In the past, I've had to deal with problem solving. For example, during my World War II VE Day song, I had problems with mixing my track. Mark told me that my vocals sounded not loud enough. I found by copying and pasting the vocals and panning them, one vocal track to the left, one to the right, and one centered in the middle, that it made the mix sound much more wider and the vocals sounded louder. I've also had problems with keeping my vocals on beat and in tune. This can be helped by Steve, Mark and Nick listening back to the track and pointing out where I went wrong so that I'm able to fix the track because of this. I also overcame this problem with Natalie, a vocal coach at the college, who was able to point out to me where I went wrong and taught me breath control techniques to help me with this, such as gently breathing in through the nose for 5 seconds, holding it in for 5 seconds, breathing out through the mouth for 5 seconds, and then relaxing for 5 seconds. Apart from this, she also taught me to annotate my lyrics, for example by saying how I want to emote stronger and I want to indicate that it's offbeat. I will also research my way out of problems. For example, if I'm recording an instrument in the studio and don't know any recording methods which are effective, then I'll research this via the aforementioned books and websites, as well as by asking the advice of my tutors who may know a relevant recording method and can teach it to me as valuable primary research. The method of doing so would be documented in WordPress, with pictures taken of the method being set up, and of course, along the way, with the song being produced. Another problem which might occur is copyright. For example, if I'm using samples in my song, which might mean researching into sample clearance, and which can be done via books on the subject, reliable articles and videos. This is very important, especially if I'm hoping to get the songs up on streaming services, and which could lead to legal troubles if I'm not able to get sample clearance beforehand. The project itself will be released on Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube and streaming platforms, with my written work documenting the process of making the album up on WordPress. The album cover itself would take inspiration from anime/manga art, partly inspired by the Japanese artist Takashi Murakami, and who works closely with hip-hop artists, being most known for his work with Kanye West, who he designed 2 album covers for. Finally, here are some ideas which I think will inspire the project's content and the album cover. Thank you for listening, and I hope when the project is released that you'll enjoy it. Man, fuck a bucket list, I'm down to the sarcophagus. Feel like I came in the game with the Omnitrix. About to form my own dream team, call it Alien Force. Nobody can join it, flight ain't already amazing, of course. Man, fuck a bucket list, I'm down to the sarcophagus. Feel like I came in the game with the Omnitrix. About to form my own dream team, call it Alien Force. Nobody can join it, flight ain't already amazing, of course. See, I live for flat nostalgia blast.